Hogan's the Macho Man, yeah.
Hey guys, hello gorgeous. It's WrestleMania weekend, so with the showcase of the Immortals upon us once again, I figured it'd be a good time to be
talking about history.
Talking about the WWF LJN Wrestling Superstars figures of the 80s. These were some of the most fun toys I owned as a kid because you couldn't break them. They were made of hard rubber and, like wrestlers, were made to take a beating. Wrestling fans didn't care about sculpts or paint jobs back in the 80s. We didn't want these to look nice on a shelf. In fact, many of them couldn't stand on their own on a shelf anyway. These guys were like cartoon or comic book characters come to life. Loud, colorful, and able to do amazing feats of strength and athleticism in the ring. All in one take. I'm going to be taking a look at the 8-inch series in today's video. Series 1 was released in 1984 and consisted of 9 figures made up of baby faces, aka the good guys, and heels, aka the bad guys. There was the WWF World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan.
And what you gonna do?
Hogan's protege and new inductee into this year's WWE Hall of Fame, Hillbilly Jim. The guy who got me into wrestling in the first place. The master of grabbing them cakes. The JYD Junkyard Dog.
This change will knock sparks up from your hind end that I call the 4th of July.
Hogan's arch nemesis, Rowdy Roddy Piper.
I actually beat the champion, but no! You don't want to give me the belt, no!
Nikolai Volkov, Big John Studd, Superfly Jimmy Snuka,
The 8th wonder of the world, Andre the Giant!
and the dastardly villain who Hogan won the title from, the Iron Sheik. These days, if you want to relive the birth of Hulkamania, you turn on the WWE Network. But back in the 80s, we used LJN Superstars.
A vicious clothesline sends him down with a Sheik and rams him. Hulk Hogan, he drops the big leg on him. He's down for the cover of the leg. 1, 2, he got him. We have a new champion as Hulk Hogan rolling the boom on the Iron Sheik.
The figures with accessories were extra special since they were so simplistically designed. It was nice to have a belt or a hat in order to spruce them up a bit. Although they'd go flying once the bell rang. Series 2 in 1985 only featured 6 wrestlers. It's a testament to Andre's popularity and Vince McMahon's respect for him that he received a second figure the following year, with a retooled body and an updated, shorter haircut. Even though this figure was a bit smaller than the first release, my Big John Studd still couldn't body slam Andre.
Look at this. Studd trying to slam Andre. Forget about it. Andre now going to work on the leg. Look at this. Andre picks him up. He slammed him.
The Giant had no trouble collecting the $15,000 prize for slamming Studd, though. George the Animal Steel was ready to dine on some turnbuckles.
This guy belongs in a cage. There's no doubt about it. There's no room for him in professional wrestling. Look at him.
The tag team champions were represented with Greg the Hammer Valentine and Brutus the f***ing Barber Beefcake. Although he wouldn't be the barber for a few years to come. We got one step closer to recreating the main event of WrestleMania 1 with the release of Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. Whatever you do, don't call him Paula.
People calling me Paula. People are gonna pay.
And the other half of the WrestleMania 2 main event, the Walking Condominium, King Kong Bundy. Also released in 1985 was a place to hold your matches. The WWF Sling 'em Fling 'em ring. This thing was almost as sturdy as the figures were.
As this capacity crowd counts along.
And if that wasn't enough, the classic blue salad steel cage was also released. So you could recreate that WrestleMania 2 main event with Hogan versus Bundy.
A scoop slam!
He did it! He body slammed King Kong Bundy, I can't believe it! Off the ropes, Hogan with a big leg drop. and he's leaving the cage. Bundy going to the door. Hogan's out first. Hogan's out the back.
Or other classic cage matches, like the controversial Hogan vs. Orndorff Saturday night's main event cage match.
Let's find out.
Hogan
right
dropped first.
now. No, Hogan's legs are bent. Orndorff's are straight. There's no doubt. Orndorff's hit the ground first. There's the replay again. Let's look at it again. Hogan's legs are bent. You can see Mr. Wonderful's legs are straight.
And your high flyers could soar from the top of this 15-foot high steel cage.
15 feet high. Oh my God! Everybody on their feet. Flying elbow.
Series 3 in 1986 was a WrestleMania-sized lineup. 17 figures. And they weren't all just wrestling superstars. Making their debut in the ring and around the ring were some managers, announcers, and jobbers, or enhancement talent for your superstars to beat up to get over on TV matches. The lineup included Intercontinental Champion Tito Santana,
And I intend to keep this. Arriba!
who's wearing a Jack's IC title belt, the living legend Bruno Sammartino, and the man from the Double Cross Ranch in Amarillo, Texas, Terry Funk.
You jackass.
Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and his arch rival, who, in my opinion, is the greatest wrestler of all time, the Macho Man Randy Savage.
I was the greatest professional wrestler in the world. Oh, proud. Yeah, I'm proud.
I couldn't wait to recreate Savage winning the IC title from that chump Chico Santana using some cold rolled steel.
He's got something in his hand. Oh, look at this. He
tapped
throws
him.
that right into Santana's face.
We got a new champion.
I can't believe it.
We got a new Intercontinental Champion, Monsoon.
History made right here in the Boston Gardens as Randy Savage, the Macho Man, knocks cold champion Tito Santana.
You could just call him Champ now, Gorilla.
And some more of my all-time favorites were released in '86 as well. The legendary British Bulldogs, Davey Boy Smith and the Dynamite Kid, who came up with some of the most revolutionary offense ever, like Dynamite Kid's flying headbutt off of Davey Boy's shoulders.
Dynamite. Up on top of the back wall. Tremendous headbutt.
Sheik and Volkov got their manager with classy Freddie Blassie,
I could care less what you say or what those peasant like geeks say.
who included a cane accessory for taking cheap shots while the ref wasn't looking. Bobby the Brain Heenan arrived to provide his brilliance to Stud and Bundy.
And don't you call me Weasel. Somebody just call me Weasel here. Somebody's calling me Weasel. Must be from behind there.
If you were a fan of Fuji Vice, you could come up with your own new episodes with the magnificent Morocco figure and his manager, Mr. Fuji. Jimmy Hart had his megaphone molded onto his hand so you wouldn't lose it, allowing him to knock out his wrestlers' opponents for years to come. And Super Mario himself, Captain Lou Albano, helped your British Bulldogs figures capture tag team gold from Beefcake and Valentine.
What you thinking about? Oh, holy Moses, rammed right head first. And down. It's over. That's like that. It's over. I can't believe it. History made here at WrestleMania 2.
Even though they didn't do much on the outside of the ring, it was awesome having the managers there. It just made the whole playing experience more realistic, having not just the stake of the wrestlers, but the garnish of all the supporting players as well. Like Mean Gene Okerlund, who was there to conduct interviews that would set up the matches.
I'm going to be a nice guy. I'm not going to insult you.
Or Jesse the Body Ventura, calling the action from ringside.
The Giant is going to win. The champ is going down.
And since not every match could be a pay-per-view main event, you could use the enhancement talent like Corporal Kirshner and S.D. Jones to get your talent over at TV tapings. Honorable mention goes to Hasbro's mail-order 8-inch Sergeant Slaughter figure, which was released in 1986 as well, and marketed by Hasbro as being intended for use with the LJN Wrestling Superstars. LJN had planned a Slaughter figure of their own but scrapped it when Sarge left WWF for Hasbro to do G.I. Joe. The story of Hasbro buying LJN's unused Slaughter mold is simply that, just a story. The Hasbro Slaughter was 100% original Hasbro design and tooling. 1987 saw another astounding 17 figures released, again made up of an assortment of job descriptions. trust him, there was Jake the Snake Roberts with Damien.
If you're good to me, I'll make sure he's good to you.
And Randy Savage's manager, the lovely Miss Elizabeth, who Randy made sure never stole the spotlight from him.
I think that your time is done, and I think that the spotlight should go on top of me, yeah.
For some reason, that geeky announcer from WWF Superstars on Saturday morning, Vince McMahon, got a figure.
Hello everyone, Vince McMahon at ringside.
Wonder why? Maybe he was close with WWF President Jack Tunney.
Unequivocally.
Now you could have a full commentary team at ringside calling the action. Just be sure to get out of the way if Terry Funk shows up.
I cannot believe what we are witnessing here as Terry Funk snapped. Oh my God! What? He's not going to pound drive him on the table. No! He's got him up. Oh wow! That just jammed out of his spine. Terry Funk has gone crazy. Funk has gone crazy.
And with the release of Cowboy Bob Orton,
His name's Ace. I love my bodyguard.
we could finally recreate the ending of the WrestleMania 1 main event. If you had a BA figure from A-Team, that is.
Oh, nice save by Mr. T. As Piper was about to lower the boom. Look now. Oh, and Orndorff. Unbelievable. With the cash. Down for the cover. Pat Patterson. He got out. They got out. Unbelievable. Pandemonium here in the garden.
And you didn't necessarily have to always recreate history. You could be the booker and rewrite it too.
Oh, look at Roddy Piper just gone bananas. Roddy Piper's gone crazy here.
Roddy Piper may never have been WWF champ in Jack Tunney's ring, but he was in mine.
I am the champion!
You could have a battle of the full Nelsons with Billy Jack Haynes and Hercules Hernandez. A couple of tag teams were released. The Killer Bees, Jumping Jim Brunzell, and the Humble B. Brian Blair, and the Hart Foundation, Bret the Hitman Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Adorable Adrian Adonis came out to spruce up your ring. The King, Harley Race, was released with his coveted removable crown. And there was also the Ugandan giant Kamala, Ken Patera with promo murdering action.
Whip me like a red-headed stepson. I'm sick and tired of that type of treatment.
And a couple more enhancement guys for those TV tapings in Brantford, Ontario. Outback Jack, Ted Arcidi, and Coco Beware with Frankie. 1988 saw the line begin to wind down, and these figures are more rare than the others. There was Acts of Demolition. Strange that they didn't release Smash as well in the same lineup. The Beast from the East, Bam Bam Bigelow. Hacksaw Jim Duggan with his trusty 2x4. The Honky Tonk Man with guitar. One Man Gang, Ted DiBiase, and a new version of Hulk Hogan with 2 different paint decos. Strike Force was released with Rick Martel and Tito Santana with white trunks, and some more managers were released as well. Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake got their manager, Luscious Johnny Valiant, although at that point he had become Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And Slick was also released. And we finally got a referee figure. 2 variants, white or blue shirt. Up until this point, the referee had to be imagined, or your hand would take the place of the ref. But now you could actually waffle the ref from behind.
Referee got wiped out.
Now we got a major problem.
And create a travesty of justice when the face would roll up the heel with no one to count. And when the face is trying to revive the ref, the heel takes advantage and lowers the boom. Goes for the pin, and we get the trademark long injured ref 3 count.
That's 2.
This is it.
No, certainly they're not going to want all this.
You can almost hear the riot start in the stands. Remember, red heat is good, but if they go silent, that's white heat, and it means they're storming the ring. Series 6 in 1989 was the line's swan song. 19 figures were released, but only 5 were new molds. The rest were just re-releases on new black cards. The new figures included the Big Boss Man with a nightstick, one half of the Islanders, Haku, without crown to the dismay of many wrestling fans, Rick Rude with probably the most useless pose for wrestling play, one half of the Powers of Pain, the Warlord, and the Ultimate Warrior.
Load the spaceship with the rocket fuel. Load it with the word.
There was a repaint of short-haired Andre in his black singlet, commemorating his heel turn, although he's still smiling and he looks like he's about to offer someone a peanut. And the re-released figures were wrestlers who were still on top, receiving new pushes, or had just returned. Hogan, Stud, Beefcake, Bigelow, Honky, Jake, Axe, Savage, Elizabeth, Brett DiBiase, Hacksaw, and for some reason Adrian Adonis, even though he had left the company in May of '87 and passed away in the middle of '88. I'd like to think the royalties from that figure went to his family. In addition to these single card releases, tag team box sets were also released throughout the years that included a set of tag team belts, which were a brown version of the Hogan World title. The teams released were the Bulldogs, Valentine and Beefcake, the Hart Foundation, Hogan and Hillbilly Jim, Sheik and Volkov, the Killer Bees, and Strike Force. LJN also produced other sized WWF figures such as Bendies, Thumb Wrestlers, and giant 16-inch posable figures of Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper with removable shirts. The final series that never saw a release would have included Bad News Brown, the Bushwhackers, Luke and Butch, and the missing halves of Demolition and Powers of Pain, Demolition Smash, and the Barbarian, who could help order your Tommy Young figure around. The biggest shame is the final figure that was planned but not released. It would have certainly given you something to wrestle with. Brother Love. After the LJN run, WWF moved their license over to Hasbro, and wrestling figures have been more posable and less durable ever since. But Jakks did produce some rubber figures that homaged the LJN figures of the 80s, including figures for Ric Flair, Steve Austin, The Undertaker, The Rock, and Shawn Michaels. They were smaller than the original LJN figures though, so sadly aren't perfectly compatible with the original roster or ring, but as Gorilla Monsoon used to say, when you've got 'em down on the mat, everyone's the same size.
Will you stop?
You got it, Gorilla. And that's the history of WWF Wrestling Superstars by LJN. Got a wrestling memory? Scroll down and go to town. Pile drive the Patreon to support the boyhood dream. And to join the tribe, headbutt subscribe.
For Jesse the Body Ventura, this is the Gorilla saying so long, everybody.
Enjoy WrestleMania. Ooh, Nerdmasty, yeah!